Okay, so we're continuing on with political parties, and this is part 2 of chapter 5 on political parties. And so the learning objectives in this chapter are that we're going to be talking about, covered the ideologies in the last part. Now I'm going to be bringing them together in what it's like for the Democratic and Republican parties in Texas. So we're focusing on Texas. Now I have to tell you though is that, when I present the ideologies, it's like this wide spectrum of nobody's either like so far to the right or so far to the left. A lot of people fall kind of in the middle. So I'm going to be telling you how Texas is kind of set up into different or two different factions within each of the parties. So we'll be talking about it within that regard. We're going to be talking about the racial and the ethnic votes, and I'll show you some graphics on that. We're going to be talking about the party machines and conventions in Texas, and that's basically how's the party run. What organizations or institutions are set up in order for the party to hold the elections, get the delegate count, do the state conventions, do the party platforms. We'll talk about that. And the last one, the realignment and de-alignment, in the last graphic that I showed you in the part 1, I showed you how the party affiliation has been declining. So we're going to be talking about maybe some of the reasons why it has been declining then. Okay, look at this map right here. And so this is based on the last presidential election, the one in 2015, I'm sorry, 16. And so if you look at Texas, you can see that Texas is by far very Republican because you see a lot of red. So usually the conservative or the Republicans are depicted in red, whereas the Democrats are depicted in blue. Now, what you should also notice is that a lot of the urban areas, the large urban centers are blue. So there's been this divide in how Texas has been voting. You find that in the large urban centers that they do support the Democratic Party on a large scale. I mean, a very large scale, as does South Texas. But the rest of the state, which is a very rural area, there are a lot of small towns, a lot of farming communities, that type of thing, tend to vote Republican, and that's what this map is reflecting. So if you're saying, well, is it more Republican or is it more Democrat? Again, it's kind of like half and half, but it's really who comes out to vote. Who has a better party machinery to be able to get people out to vote. Okay, so in the Democratic Party, I gave you some characteristics of what liberals believe in. So let's bring out this type of liberal ideology and apply it to the Democratic Party, specifically here in Texas. So here in Texas, the Democratic Party is divided into two factions. One is the more conservative wing and more liberal wing. So the conservative wing has gone by different names. It's gone by the Blue Dog Democrats, and now they're being called the establishment Democrats. And so the conservative wing of the Democratic Party tends to be more successful in the state of Texas, and most governors that have been elected as Democrats have come from this conservative wing or this more establishment wing. And so there is more success in that, as are most legislators as well. Okay, so who belongs to this establishment wing or the blue dog wing? Well, if not everybody that has money belongs to the Republican Party. We have a big presence of oil, gas, sulfur industries. The petroleum industry is huge in the state of Texas, here in Corpus Christi, as well as Houston, as well as Midland, Odessa, as well as the Permian Basin. So it's just kind of all over Texas. So it's big. So they're not all Republicans. A lot of them are Democrats, but they tend to be more of this conservative wing, the more establishment wing of the Democratic Party, as is agribusiness. And agribusiness tends to be fertilizers and pesticides, the producers of those. That if they are Democrats, they tend to be more of the conservative wing or establishment wing of the Democratic Party. As are publishers of the daily newspapers, tend to be more of that conservative wing. And so, each newspaper has like their own slant. Some of them will be a little bit more progressive than others. The Austin American Statesman is probably like the most progressive newspaper in the state of Texas, with the other ones falling somewhere within a range of what's more conservative or not. Okay, so let's talk about liberals, the liberal wing of the Democratic Party. And so the liberal wing has been known as the Yellow Dog Democrats. Right now, they're being called progressives. So the progressives tend to really believe the the most um, left hand, yeah, the most left part of the spectrum of the ideologies. They tend to support everybody that's going to be running on the National Party ticket and its presidents. So they're calling them yellow dog because they're saying if you are a Democrat, you should vote for all the Democratic candidates. So these liberal groups, the ones that tend to be more progressive, tend to be unions and organized labors, although in the 2016 election, they did not vote Democrats. They voted Republicans. They voted for Trump. So there's been like a shift in whether or not they thought the Democratic Party was courting them, paying attention to them, telling them what they would do for the unions and organized labors, and the Democratic Party felt really short on that. Okay, when it comes to racial and ethnic groups, I'm going to be talking about a little bit about two of them. Now, the NAACP, I think most people are familiar with the National American Association of Colored People, which is very influential in getting a lot of the civil rights legislation that was passed in 1964 to curtail, disrupt, to stop the discrimination of the African American population. Okay, there was a group that was operating in South Texas, and it was started right here in Corpus Christi, and it's called LULAC, or the League of United Latin American Citizens. Because what a lot of people don't know is that in South Texas, and I'm talking from San Antonio South, people of Mexican American heritage were treated the same way as the African Americans were in other parts of the country. So the LULAC united with the NAACP to push to get legislation to stop this type of discrimination, this type of racial discrimination. So these two groups tend to be more liberal in the way that they view things, and they tend to push the national ticket and the more liberal ticket. Okay, professionals tend to be more liberal, or oftentimes it is said the more educated that you are, the more progressive that you are. So this includes teachers and intellectuals. And intellectuals, they kind of define as anybody who's educated, and so that is like anybody that has at least 2 years of college is considered to be more educated and or an intellectual. So people that are more educated tend to be uh, uh, more liberal in the way that they think about things because they're not only looking at the country for themselves, they're looking at how different laws are affecting other people within other parts of the country or even their own backyard. You know, what's happening to society, you know, what's happening within civil society. So they just have to have more of a civic gene, if you want to call it that, or they develop one. Small farmers and ranchers tend to be more liberal in the way that they think about things if they're in the Democratic Party because they like the different types of programs, the farm programs and the Farm Bill and the different types of subsidies that come to them in case they cannot grow their crops or if they have problems with damaged crops or the crop yield isn't what it should be, that they're losing money, so they tend to support more programs, so they tend to be more liberals. Okay, so there's been some recent success in capturing party nominations, and with the 2020 election cycle, the Democratic Party has become more progressive in general, much more so than it had been in the past. Now, when it comes to the Republican Party, some of the demographics are this. People or in the past. Again, there's been a lot of shifts, but this is historically this is the way that it's been. Middle and upper classes in urban and suburban communities tend to align with it or affiliate with the Democratic Party. And so what happens is that a lot of times people that they're educated and they get good jobs, like the nouveau riche, and that just means the newly rich of Houston and Dallas, uh, do tend to be to affiliate with the Republican Party. Okay, I showed you a graphic that says that's not so true anymore. Suburban, like outside the city core, tends to be more Republican, but more urban within the city core itself, and however the city wants to define its core. But the more urban dwellers tend to be more of the Democratic Party. So that's kind of the way that it is. And so a lot of times people will shift from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party because they say, well, I got educated, I got a good job, I'm making good money, and I want to keep some of that money, so I'm going to affiliate with the Republican Party. Other groups that also tend to affiliate with the Republican Party are high income ranchers. And these are people that own like the Kennedy Ranch or the King Ranch, the Armstrong Ranch. Big cattle ranchers like that tend to be Republican. Also, people that are in the military, both the active duty as well as the retired military officers, tend to be to affiliate with the Republican Party. And then we have the traditional conservatives, and these they call these the Reagan conservatives a lot of times when they're saying we have traditional Republican values, which is basically, fiscally conservative, socially conservative, but more compassionate conservative, like Reagan or like either of the Bushes, George H.W. Bush or George W. Bush. Those are more of the values under traditional conservatives. A lot of times it also says we believe in families that should be mom, pop, 2.3 kids, a dog, and a cat. So it's more of a traditional type of lifestyle that they advocate. Okay, so I gave you the ideologies, and now we're going to start putting some of these together. And I told you before that there are factions, or not everybody falls within the same one way that you look at it. It's like a range. It's a polarization in a lot of words when you talk about ideologies on either side. But people tend to fall someplace, along different lines of this spectrum or different points of this spectrum. So we're going to be talking about the conservative and the moderate factions within the Republican Party. Now, the conservative faction are the evangelical Christians or the fundamentalist Christians. And so they have gone by many names. And so they used to be called the Moral Majority or the Christian Right Coalition. Now they're evangelicals. And so what they believe in is the issues that they believe in are that family comes first, that they live their life according to the religion, that there should be community morals. They believe that community should uh, talk to you about the way that you should behave within a community. Now, this is considered to be the right wing element. And so, and within the right wing element, that just means that they're farther to the right of the ideological spectrum. They have gone by many different names, as I said. They're right now they're called the Freedom Caucus. They're also elements of what is called the Tea Party, and this is the Tea Party. It's not a political party. It's a group in how they see things. But the bigger umbrella of all this is that they're evangelical Christians, and so they want to live their life according to the gospel, according to the Bible, I should say. I guess basically the same thing, right? Okay, but then within the Republican Party, there's a more moderate or more centrist wing. So they call these the establishment Republicans. And so they tend to favor the more middle of the road politics. They're saying there needs to be compromise, with the Democrats in order to get things done. So they tend to look at things more of in a centrist way, more in a more pragmatic way. What do we need to do to get laws passed within the country? Uh, the moderate or more centrist wing, the establishment Republicans, fear the radicalism of the conservative wing because they're saying they fear that this conservative wing is going to tarnish the party. Okay, as it stands right now, and this has been true probably for the last maybe 5 election cycles, so I would say like maybe about 10 years or so, and it started in well, maybe it's longer than that. It started in the 90s, in the mid 90s. The evangelical wing, the Tea Party wing, the Freedom Caucus wing, they have been gaining more and more power within the Republican Party. So the Republican Party is trying to figure out who they are and what they represent and which group is going to have more power. And that's true at the national level as well as at the state level. It's not a done deal. Nothing's been set in stone. It's a continuous fight over who's going to have the dominant ideologies for this party, the Republican Party. And it's not that the Democratic Party is doing much better. The Democratic Party is doing much better. Okay, so in Texas, the thing about the Texas Republican Party is that it doesn't really go out and try to court the Democrats, so they don't have a lot of minority voters. Uh, Historically, minorities and the people of color, if you want to call them that, are not courted by the Republican Party. And so they have a disconnect, if you want to call it that, between what, who they are and who they need to get elected, to bring people into their base. Right now, it's a little bit even more factioned than it has been in the past. But they've always had a problem trying to bring minorities in. And so, one of the things that you have to do in the assignment that I assigned to you, that paper, that reaction paper, is to look at that and see how are they looking? How is Republican Party looking? But also the Democratic Party. Who were they courting? Who were they courting? Who are they trying to bring into their party base? Okay, so there's some progress that has been made in the Republican Party because within the Hispanic community, especially the Hispanic community, they call it the tipping point. And the reason that they call the Hispanic population the tipping point is because Hispanics do not vote as a block for either party. The blacks do vote as a block for the Democratic Party, but the Hispanics don't. And it kind of depends on your ethnicity. For example, if you are of Mexican American heritage, you do tend to be a Democrat. If you are of Puerto Rican, which Puerto Ricans are part of the United States, it's not a state, but it's U.S. territory, and they can vote if they're here in the country, in this country, on the mainland, as they call it, then you do tend to vote as a Democrat. But all the other ethnicities tend to vote Republicans, like the Cubans and the Venezuelans and the Colombians and all that. They tend to vote Republican. So in a lot of ways, you can say they kind of cancel each other out. So what the Republican Party really needs to do is go for that swing vote. How can we bring, this population over that they can vote either way? And a lot of them, don't really want to align with either party. They're voting as independents, and to bring them into a party base, whether it's the Democratic Party base or if it's the Republican Party base. Okay, so then if you look at this particular slide right here, it's the Latino population by county. And so you can see that there are parts of Texas, especially in South Texas, that have a high density population of Hispanic population, but that doesn't mean that the Hispanics vote for Democrats. It just says this is where the Hispanics are. The map that I showed you at the beginning of the of this lecture, you can see that they do tend to vote Republican as well. Okay, so here in Texas, there's a party machinery. Well, every state has one, but the way that it works here in Texas is that there's a temporary party organization, and this one is the one that comes about every time there's going to be a Democratic National Convention, a Republican National Convention. And so they are in June and July of every fourth year of when the president is going to be elected. So there's different levels. The precinct convention is like the lowest level. It's the grassroots level democracy. And I always tell people or students that they want to get involved in politics, this is where they need to start at the precinct level. Then there's from the precinct there, the county is the one that's over all of the precincts, and so they have a convention, and the convention, the county will pick the people that are going to be going to the convention, and the convention is the one that's held at the state level. It's been in different parts of Texas, and what they do at this particular one is that they will sign resolutions, or they will forward resolutions, and the delegates that are going to be going to the state convention. So the county meets with all of these precinct people, and they're saying, okay, these are the ones that we're going to be sending to the state convention, and these are the ones that are going to be voting on our behalf as Democrats or as Republicans, because it's for both. So at the state convention then, they will elect the party officers, who's going to be running the state conventions for either party. They will appoint the executive committee by the senatorial districts, which is they're kind of big districts. They're going to write the party platform. And the party platform is the one that you're going to have to get into to write this reaction paper, the one that's going to be due in, this week. And so in that one, they will lay out every single issue area and how that party believes in that issue, or how they want to advance that particular issue. They will talk about how they want to advance the like education or transportation or healthcare or environment. So it's every single issue. When you write your paper, what you can do is that you can do a compare and contrast of how each party handles it. And that's probably like the easiest way to do it. Now, what after the state convention assigns the delegates and votes for the person, because we, the state of Texas, are going to be voting for this particular person, from the state of Texas. Okay, that's one of the things that they do. They will certify to the SOS, and SOS is the Secretary of State. And the Secretary of State is the one that has everything to do with party candidates. And they will nominate them for the primary election, the ones that are going to be running in the primary. Okay, the primary's already passed, but this is the one that they nominated for the primary, or from the primary, I should say. Okay, then in the permanent organization, again, it's at the precinct level, and so there's a chair for every precinct level that organizes the people that are going to be the voting judges for that particular precinct. It's not held so much at the precinct. There are precincts, those are still important, but now the way that the election system is in many counties, and Nueces in particular, because I know Nueces County the best, is we don't really vote in the precinct anymore. We vote more within more a general type of voting centers, and I think that's what they call them, voting centers, because we didn't have enough, or we're not ADA compliant with a lot of the voting centers that they had. Okay, so all of these precinct level chairs will report to the county level, and the chair of the county level is one that presides over all of the precinct chairs and all of the county executive committees. Then at the state levels, okay, so there the county sends them on to the state levels, and at the state level, these are the delegates that are going to choose the state chair, and they will serve as the head of the party for the state of Texas. Okay, so when you look at the party control, you can see that it's pretty much red, and it's kind of been consistent for probably the last maybe 10 years again. The purple ones are the ones that are the swing state. As you can see, Texas is very much a red state. And so I'm not saying that Texas is so conservative, or we don't know if Texas is that conservative, because I always say it depends on who comes out to vote. And so what this says to me then is that in Texas, the Republican machinery has a much stronger organization in getting people to come out and vote. The purple ones are the swing vote. The one in the middle, they don't really have primaries. So they have a different system. So that's why I said each state has their own system. Okay, so we talked about the Republican Party in the state of Texas and how dominant it has been since the 1990s. And so the people have been voting for the Republican candidates over and over again. And so the question is, well, is it true that Texas is this conservative? And how would we know that? How would we know if there's been a shift, because Texas was a very democratic state for such a long period of time? Well, what they do is they look at the public opinion polls and they say, well, it could be that there are more Texans that are identifying with the Republican Party, but there might be other reasons that Texas has become so Republican. And some of these reasons, one is called realignment and the other one is de-alignment. And so the realignment says, yes, there has been a shift among the Democrats where they are voting for the Republicans. And so these are the people that were more conservative, of the conservative wing of the Democratic Party, that they shifted there because they feel the values have shifted. They're saying, well, the Republican Party is the one that really, uh, you know, uh, has more of what I believe in. It kind of follows my belief system. I want to keep more money. I mean, people switch parties for many different reasons. But anyway, so yeah, so realignment may have been taking place. It could also be that other people are coming in, and we have had a lot of migration, especially from the what they call the Frost Belt states like Detroit, like Michigan and Illinois, and all these places that they had their factories shut down. Well, Texas has always been very fortunate in that we have had a pretty strong economy, and we're one of the few states that really have jobs to offer. So people come down here and they will move to Texas to take jobs or to be able to get jobs. And so this has kind of helped to break down this traditional partisan pattern of it being so Democrat, Democrat, Democrat. So it's helped to break that one down. It could also be that de-alignment may be involved. and this is kind of what I mentioned a while ago, it may be that voters really do not want to identify with either party. They're saying, well, either the parties are too partisan, we don't follow their politics, we don't like their politics, we're gonna vote as independents. And so this is kind of like with the swing vote that I was talking about, when they're saying, you have to convince me. The swing voters are saying, candidates, you have to convince me of why I should vote for you. So the way that they see that, or the evidence that's provided, is that there's an increase of split ticket voters, and they vote for candidates from both parties in the general election, and much more so than straight ticket voting, like voting all Democrat or voting all Republican. And that's fine. I mean, you can vote for whomever you want. But again, if you're an independent, and sometimes, as I said when I talked about voting in elections, people vote for a candidate because they are more akin to the way that they see things. They believe in what they're saying, the issues, and that's what they talk about. I agree with how he stands on this issue, whether it be healthcare, whether it be jobs, whether it be the environment. They're looking at the issue. Or it could be because they say, I really, really like this person, and I want this person to be the president of the United States because I feel that he or she, well, up to this point, it's only been a he, has good leadership skills. So people vote for different reasons. If you're independent, you have your own set of criteria of how you need to vote. Again, both parties need to vote these independent or court these independents in order for them to vote for their particular party. Okay, so when they did the studies and to see, well, which one is it really occurring, or which one of these is occurring at the highest rate, and they're saying, well, it shows that both of them are occurring pretty much at the same time, when people are more willing to change parties, and people are more willing not to align or identify with either party, and these are occurring at the same time. And again, this is called de-alignment.